Hi, I'm Lynn Nesbitt, one of the pastors at First United Methodist Church of Dothan, and I'm here to bring you a good word, and that word is love one another. One of the things that Jesus told his disciples right before he went to the Garden of Gethsemane was, "Love one another as I have loved you. By this shall all know that you're my disciples, that you love one another." He didn't say, check each other carefully, make sure that everybody has exactly the same correct theology. He didn't say, now make sure everybody knows all the rules. He said, love one another. The way you're going to be able to figure out who's Christian and who's not is that you love each other. I think during these COVID times, we've begun to understand that better than we've ever understood it. Many of us knew that verse for a long time, but understanding it's another matter. And I've watched how we've loved each other, how the more whole physically folks, the healthier folks, have shopped for the physically frail. I've watched how even when we can't be together physically, friends have called each other and checked on each other. And I've certainly come to value my friendships, my connections in the church and my family as I never have before. One of the things that I was taught when I was taught pastoral care a long time ago in seminary was that when someone came to me with an issue or a problem, to ask them, has this ever happened to you before? And if they say yes, say, what'd you do then? To see if perhaps they had found their own solution in times past and had just forgotten about that. How have you done it before? Did it work then? Have you tried it now? So one of the things that I began to think about, I began to wonder, how did the early church handle pandemics? Because pandemics are part of life. They just happen. They happen. They've been happening for all of recorded history. Sometimes they called them plagues instead of pandemics. It was the same thing. And how did the early church handle pandemics? Before being Christian was legal in Rome, a great plague came to the city. And historians tell us that anyone who was wealthy immediately left. They just left. If someone in their household was sick, they literally left them there, sick and dying, and fled the city if they had a villa perhaps out in the countryside. They did not understand germ theory the way we understand how communicable diseases work, but they did get it, that if you were around a sick person, you were likely to get sick yourself. And so these miserable people would be left while their family fled the city or their employer fled the city. Those who could not get out of the city took the sick person out of their house. And people were, again, quite literally flung on the street to die. Christians didn't do that. Christians began caring for the sick. They didn't leave them. They cared for them. Some of the sick died not actually from the disease, but from dehydration and from not having anything to eat. Christians would nurse the sick, and many of those Christians who stayed and nursed the sick became sick and died themselves. That was absolutely part of the price they paid. But here's the interesting thing. A lot of those they nursed got well. And it became clear that if you were in a Christian household, you were more likely to live than in a pagan household, even if you were of a higher status and had more money, because there was somebody who would care for you even at the risk of their own life. And one of the great things to come from that was that as people began to see what it meant to love each other, even risking ourselves, that was a very attractive way of life. A life where folks cared for each other instead of each person being for themselves. I have enjoyed seeing the way folks have coped. Now, I'm not discounting the terrible sickness people have had. I am not discounting the financial hardships. People I love have lost their jobs. People I love have died. I'm not discounting that. But I've watched the tender, loving care. I watched people in this church and in this city make masks when medical centers said, we don't have enough masks for the people who come to our hospital, even for outpatient. They're not safe. And I saw people gear up and make dozens and dozens of masks apiece. This is the way that the world will know that you're my disciples, that you love one another.